And welcome to the Under the Bus podcast. I'm your host, Merge, and I'm here with Nelson. What's up, Nelson?
What's up, Merge? I just wrote a couple of articles preparing for the draft. I started writing really late, started going to the draft really late, but it's a really deep draft, and I had a really fun time going into film and looking up some stats on some really high players and some players that Lakers might target.
But let's be honest, the hair team was your favorite.
Yeah, no, definitely. I wrote about the five best hairstyles in the draft, and I have had a lot of fun with that because I wrote it last year, and I decided to write it again this year just because no one ever talks about it. And I don't think anyone's ever brought up the word hair in a draft podcast. So I figured, or article. So I figured I'd be the first one to start that trend.
There we go, starting trend. And we are here with special guest Tim AKA Cranjis McBasketball. What is going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well. I will admit I'm not as up to date on the top hairstyles of the draft. My focus is a little bit different. And it's been a different experience this year as opposed to the past couple of years where we had a top pick and we were looking at the top guys. But it's been really interesting analyzing some of these later first round and second round guys just because there are a lot of holes in just about everybody. And it's just a matter of what's the best combination of skills somebody does have and skills somebody doesn't have that we think they can develop. So it's an interesting new puzzle for me. So it's been a fun past couple weeks getting ready for tomorrow, and as opposed to last year, I feel so much more like a fan just because I don't feel prepared because there's so many different ways the draft could go for the Lakers.
And also, you don't have to fight De'Aaron Fox stands about Lonzo on Twitter.
Yes, that is an excellent point. We won, we did it, and we don't have to do it again this year.
Oh my gosh, I just remember how much you fought against people about Lonzo last year, man. Oh man, it was, and even into the season, I remember when Fox had one good game, people just completely added you like on Twitter, talking about, oh, he made 5 3-pointers while he's still the worst defender in the league or whatever. Like,
did you see that clutch layup?
Insane.
Did you see that clutch dunk he had?
That one game, and then after his 5 3-pointer game, I'm pretty sure his 3-point percentage for the rest of the season was like 18% or something.
It's all about the flashes, man. It's all about the flashes.
That is great.
He can jump really high and he moves really quick. So,
did you see the March Madness game against Lonzo? Like, can we be real? Yeah. He tore apart Lonzo in the pick and roll.
Lonzo ducked them all year.
They never played, which is hilarious. We played them like 5 times, including the summer league. Or I think we played them once in the preseason too. They didn't play once, which is hilarious to me. But anyway, let's move on to the breaking news from right now. It seems to be breaking news every day now with all the craziness, but a little lesser. The Lakers have traded the Chicago Bulls 2019 second rounder and some cash to the Philadelphia 76ers for the 39th pick in this year's draft. There's a lot of implications, like me and Tim were talking about before of what this could be. There's a lot of different things that could happen, but just off of an initial reaction, Tim, let's start with you. What was your initial reaction after seeing this, that this happened?
So my assumption at first was this will be a part in trading for Kawhi or trading away Dang. Is my initial thought, and I think those are 2 likely outcomes.
I agree. I think I definitely see that a pick being traded. I don't see all 3 of them staying with the Lakers just from a team building standpoint, because the Lakers are looking to win immediately. And Nelson, I know you were working and stuff, but when you first saw it, what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, I initially thought that Lakers are going to trade up because they've been talking up Zaire Smith. Kevin O'Connor's really been bringing that up quite a few times, and yeah. I personally think it makes sense for the Lakers to maybe want to go up and get a higher tier guy because kind of what Cranjis was saying. I mean, it is kind of cooler and much more relaxed to not have so much pressure on this pick because, I mean, after the lottery, it's pretty much a crapshoot, and even the lottery, the entire draft's a crapshoot in general, but like as we get lower, it's even more of a crapshoot, so it's not really as much pressure to nail the pick. When you're picking 2 or 1, that's when there's a lot of pressure, a lot of hype. You really don't want to mess that up because those are franchise-altering mistakes. Although like you do see the repercussions of like the Cavs not hitting on their like first round picks or trading them away and not having those young cost control players. And you see the Warriors who with McCaw and with Looney, these players were drafted late first, and they were cheap, and they still are cheap, and they've been able to be kept on the cheap, and they provide just bodies, which is really important, especially for what the Lakers want to do with in free agency. So it was interesting because I think it's really important to take as many swings as possible, and I feel like there's like a tier after, let's say, I think after 15 or 16. And after that, there's quite a drop off. And from like 16 to 40, it's pretty similar. And Lakers have 2 picks in that whole range. So, you know, if they can now afford to take even more swings or even more of a gamble. Like, I think if they keep, I'm assuming they're probably going to keep at least 1 second rounder. So, like, unless they really trade up. So if they keep a second rounder, now this opens the door for a Mitchell Robinson, because now they can afford to take that swing. Mm-hmm. So I feel like either they're going to trade that first and 1 more second, but I feel like the Lakers might just still keep a pick in this draft because of how many workouts they've had and how much time they've invested in the draft. So I think it's really reassuring that the Lakers are at least going to get to take a swing on someone, and in the draft it's important to take as many swings as possible. So. Yeah,
I agree. Before we move on to Kawhi talk and the rest of the prospects in the draft, I was thinking of, like what Nelson said, that if they did trade up, there are a couple names that have been flying around a little bit. Obviously, Zaire Smith has been the biggest name of those. Tim, I know it was very last minute that I asked you to do this, but from anything you were able to gain, what's your take on Zaire Smith and what you've seen before, and from any analytics stuff that you saw on him? So
his statistical profile is one of the most bizarre ones that I had to look at. Uh-huh. I'll just run you through some numbers and some comps. If you look at his offensive style of play, his like most frequently used play types were finishing cuts, dump offs, spotting up, which is normal, but putbacks and ISO. As like a shooting guard type of guy is really, really weird. Mm-hmm. Some of his top like style comparisons in terms of current NBA players, just purely based off of how they're used, were Jakar Sampson, Andre Roberson, Sam Decker, David Nwaba, and JaMychal Green. So that was interesting. I don't know. He's an all right spot up guy, an average dump off, putback scorer, but he was bad in ISO. He had like 8 pick and roll scoring attempts all season. Mm-hmm. This is one of the guys where I just don't have any idea what to make of the stats. Mm-hmm. And I think at this point, you really just need to rely on the workouts. And I don't know, he just doesn't make a lot of sense of like what I'm seeing and what I saw in the film to the talk of like how well he's doing in workouts and how he's flying up people's draft boards. So I think it's just a matter of somebody quickly progressing, quickly moving past the performance they had given us for the whole season. And for that reason, I wouldn't put too much weight into the numbers we have already. Although he was a pretty good guy on the season, 82nd percentile, offensive player impact plus minus, 81st percentile on the defensive end, 89th percentile overall. And then if you look at his created points over expectation, he's in the 56th percentile. So he was scoring a little bit more than other players would if they were given the same attempts.
I was expecting his defensive numbers to be really good because Texas Tech in general was just a really good defensive team, and they just suffocated teams, and he was a big part of that. But I get let me start by this. Zaire is probably one of my favorite players in the draft. I've been on him for a long time. Nelson knows this. Nelson knows how much I love him. But I do get the he's a power forward in the shooting guard's body stuff that people say about him, because literally like a good 25% of the time I watched him, he was just getting putbacks and he was doing garbage stuff. And that was just his game. And he's an insane athlete, which you can obviously tell just by watching him play. The dude doesn't look like he's trying when he jumps. He's probably one of the best functional athletes in this draft, if not the best functional athlete in the draft. But I do get the concerns people have on him, the shot and the offensive offensive ability to score on his own is very bad. He's a guy that is going to rely a ton on others to score, especially since he dribbles like Klay Thompson, and Klay Thompson is probably a lot better than him at dribbling the ball, and that's saying something. But I mean, I just love the thought of him as a defender and in transition. But I definitely get why people don't like him. Nelson, I know you're a guy that you don't hate Zaire, but you're not as crazy over him as I am.
Yeah, no, I have D'Anthony Melton over him just because I just think he's more functional right now as an offensive player, and that gives me some encouraging signs. I'm not saying that it's night and day, but there's a much better handle just because Melton has a pretty basic, nothing flashy, but it gets the job done. It's a functional handle. Yeah. And Zaire, on the other hand, I don't really trust him.
He just doesn't dribble.
It's really bad. I heard the Roberson comparison, and I think that pretty much a Roberson in a shooting guard's body, like less taller. I feel like that's a pretty adequate comparison. And although I do really value defense, and I personally enjoy it, like watching on film, really good individual like one-on-one defense. So that's an aspect that I enjoy of Zaire. But at that point, I understand why we take Zaire, just because you'd be banking on the athletic testing and the measurables and all that kind of stuff, and just betting on him to figure it all out. Because at this point in the draft, it's really character driven. Like you listen to Sam Vecini talk about it, and like interviews are pretty much golden. Like this is where you sell yourself to a team, and if a team thinks, okay, we saw this guy jump out of the gym in workouts, but how is he like under the hood? How is he mentally? And if he's like willing to put in the work, then he can really get the most out of that athleticism. Like he can jump out of the gym, but if you can't really do much with that, then I mean it's just unfostered potential that you really can't replicate on the basketball court. So I mean, I understand why Zaire is being talked about and why he's probably gonna go like lottery. But if I'm trading up for someone, I'd kind of prefer to trade up for Melton, just because I know what I'm getting with him, and there's still, I think, a good amount of untapped potential. And although the mystery is cool, I don't know how I feel about getting a lottery ticket if I'm going to trade up for one. Like I can get maybe like a Melvin Frazier, who's Zaire's probably has a higher ceiling, is a better prospect, but they're of that similar echelon, and getting Frazier and Melton is probably better than getting Zaire. So I mean, it's just that you have to consider all those factors when you consider trading up, and I feel like maybe it's just me. Maybe I've written so many words about D'Anthony Melton that maybe I just convinced myself that he's better than Zaire. But I think I probably prefer a proven commodity there, because kind of what Cranjis was talking about. You kind of those offensive indicators, they're pretty poor right now, and I get that he's young and he still is developing, but it's troublesome that we talked about D'Anthony Melton and how what is going to provide on offense, and the Lakers really struggled on offense last year. So I mean, like Melton provides at least a bit more on offense, and Zaire providing like pretty much being a zero and a top 10 like worst offensive player. Like that's not ideal for Lakers next year. And if you get LeBron and Paul George and probably Kawhi, then you aren't so worried about the offense. But as of right now, like I'd be a bit timid to go for a guy like Zaire.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I would say there are a couple different ways that I'm looking at it, and each of them don't really favor Zaire. One, if you are trading up for a pick, like Nelson was saying, you don't want to be taking what could be 2 or 3 assets and then rolling the dice on another guy in the mid-teens. If instead you could take a couple other lottery picks or guys who are maybe more sure bets with the picks you already have. Picking a high upside, low floor kind of guy, or maybe not just low floor, but somebody who clearly just isn't there right now as an NBA shooting guard offensively. That's the kind of play that I would make if I'm a rebuilding team, not if I'm a team expecting to bring in a couple superstars and be contending. This isn't a guy who's ready to hop on a court and do much more right now, or at least wasn't ready to do much during this NCAA season other than finish dump offs and get some putbacks He shot 38 catch and shoot jumpers in 37 games.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't doing much as far as slashing or ball handling. His playmaking was very much just from the standstill position. He wasn't hitting guys off the dribble. His defense is good and his athletic tools are really good, but it's very much a raw guy that really needs to develop, because otherwise you're looking at a guy who on offense is like a David Nwaba.
Mm-hmm. And
that's the type of player that isn't a positive on the court unless they're an elite defender. And that will likely take time as well. We see very few guards just jump in and immediately translate over. Ben Simmons did a great job with it. Lonzo Ball did a great job with it. But that if that's what we're banking on and that's what we think he can carry over right away, that I don't think that's the right fit for how the Lakers see themselves going, just in the position they are right now with what they're hoping to do this season.
Yeah, I think if we are trading up, like, again, I love Zaire, and if we trade up to get him, I'd be insanely happy. But I think Lonnie Walker and someone like Lonnie Walker or someone like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are guys that you would rather take that dice roll on, just because they seem like guys who are able to contribute right now. At least I think Lonnie would be, just because he seems to have the scoring ability pretty already. But I don't know if Zaire can be any sort of even anywhere close to a neutral on offense his first 2 or 3 years, just because of how limited he is as from a skill position. But moving on, let's go a little over to the most exciting stuff about the Lakers right now, and Kawhi Leonard meeting with Greg Popovich and saying he wants to come to the Lakers and he won't sign with any team that isn't a Los Angeles team, but more likely the Lakers. It's been a whirlwind the past 4 or 5 days with all the Kawhi stuff. I'm just gonna ask this one simple question. Tim, do you think Kawhi is a Laker by the beginning of next season?
I will say yes, and the very, very quick reason would just be a simple microeconomic supply and demand kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If he says he will be a Laker in free agency after next season, as another team, I'm not giving away the assets for a rental. That, like right now, another team could beat the Lakers with a package they put together, but I wouldn't be willing to put together that package and throw it all away if I know he won't be back. He won't be free, because if he is free, a team will certainly pay for a rental. So the Lakers are still going to have to give something substantial up.
Yeah.
But with the price being driven down, it should be below the threshold needed for the Lakers to be able to have the best offer.
Yeah, I mean, there's been people saying that like Lakers, a fair offer would be Lonzo, Ingram, and Kuzma. I'm at the point where I think you offer Ingram and a pick and Dang to a third team, and that's the Godfather offer that's the highest I would go, just because I just don't see the reason to trade multiple potential starter level players in Ingram and Alonzo and Kuzma and Josh Hart possibly, and just to get a guy who's been saying that he'll only re-sign with the Lakers if he gets traded there, or he'll only sign with a Los Angeles team if he gets traded there. So I don't get the point. I don't get the reasoning of people saying that Lakers have to trade all this stuff to get him. Nelson, same question to you: is Kawhi a Laker by next season?
I really want to say no, but I'm probably gonna say yes, because I feel like I'm gonna lean slightly towards LeBron coming here. Mm-hmm. And if he does come here, then all bets are off, and trade for Kawhi Leonard. The problem is one, are the Spurs willing to deal with the Lakers? And I mean, it all depends on what the Celtics are willing to offer, because I feel like the Celtics are like the Lakers' biggest competition right now. And if the Celtics say fuck it, like let's do it, then I'd be like really worried that they would just offer Jalen plus picks, and the Lakers can't match that really. As good as I believe Ingram's going to be, Jalen's just more proven right now in the playoffs, and I feel like the Spurs might, I don't want to speak for the Spurs, but they're probably going to value that more, and they're probably going to value the protected Memphis pick, or the Sacramento pick that they have. coming. They're probably going to value that more than whatever else Lakers can put together. So just like considering all of that, there's a lot of dominoes that need to fall for Lakers like in the right place. But I honestly feel that like if Kawhi Leonard, if one or two more, I feel like it's one or two more stories. If it's one or two more stories that Kawhi Leonard is not going to sign with the team unless it's like the Lakers, then I'd probably then I'm starting to feel much more confident. But I'm probably gonna say yes because the Lakers have the assets to compete with anyone, and if they get desperate enough, then I can see them moving them. I just feel that like if LeBron comes here, he might want to just let everything just chill out, just let him and Paul George mesh, and maybe just wait it out a year. I feel like that's an alternative that no one's really considering, because he will be a free agent in 1 year. It's not like we're waiting for 2 or 3 years down the line. It's just 1 year. But I mean, if LeBron comes here, he wants to be a contender right now. But I feel like if Kawhi doesn't come here, then LeBron could use that also as like a little excuse for like, oh, we weren't a contender this year because we don't have Kawhi yet, or because we're missing a guy, or we're just gelling. And in the second year, Kawhi comes and the expectations are raised. LeBron and Paul George have more chemistry. LeBron knows how this whole Lakers thing's going to work out. And I feel that like this allows us to get a gauge with what young players really fit with LeBron, at least the first year. So I think that's also an alternative that's not really talked about. It's just go trade for him, go trade for him right now. And I feel like it's almost appearing to be a bit rushed and a bit like from Lakers fans and from like a lot of people on Twitter, they're really anxious to get this whole thing done. And obviously you want to have him in your hands right now to be like, no, he's mine. We're going to re-sign him. We got the bird rights, all right? But being patient also has its benefits. And honestly, it all really comes down to like what LeBron tells the Lakers to do and whether the Spurs are really willing to budge and deal with the Lakers, because that's a factor that, although Cranjis brought up the supply and demand, there's also a personal like vendetta here that the Spurs and the Lakers have been these rivals, and that does get in the way of business. So I really wouldn't pass Spurs to try to keep him one more year and try to really convince him about the Spurs way. But I feel like he's gonna leave if he does stay one more year. So I'm not really all that worried. I feel like he will be a Laker at one point. It's just a matter of time of when. Odds are probably at the beginning of the season if I had a bet. But I wouldn't be too shocked if the Lakers waited out a bit.
I also think he will be a Laker. I want just a quick yes or no from both of you. Is he a Laker tomorrow? Tim, is he?
I'll say no.
Nelson,
no, hard no.
I agree. I think the Spurs wait till after free agency settles to do that. Sort of like the Kyrie trade. But
or midseason next year.
Yeah, that could definitely happen too, which would be better for Lakers, to be honest.
Yeah, that'd be the best of both worlds for what Nelson was talking about. You can find out which young guys mesh with LeBron. LeBron gets time with Paul George, and then you grab him for like a playoff. Well, not a playoff push, but a title push.
Yeah, right. and for a lot less than you probably would have in the postseason. All right, right now. So that's definitely going to be the biggest thing. Him and LeBron are definitely going to be the biggest names talked about the whole offseason, which is it's already gotten to a crazy point, but I'm trying to enjoy it, and I'm being optimistic about everything right now. Let's move on to the full on deep dive on these draft prospects. So I gave Tim a huge list of guys in the 25th and 39th now and 47th range. Let's start from the very top, and I'm really excited for this one just from what Cran just said on Twitter. Let's talk about Kevin Huerter. Go ahead and say the stats, Tim.
Okay. Yeah. So really quickly, his top comparisons, just in terms of style, I think will kind of hit home with Laker fans. Number one, right off the bat, KCP. And when you look at how he's used or how he was used at Maryland, it's quick pin downs, which is what we saw with KCP. Yeah. Stagger screens, floppy action, flare screens, pin downs. It's all the same stuff. He did it really, really well. So that's top comp. Evan Fournier, Bojan Bogdanovic, Nick Young, and Tim Hardaway. So all of these guys, except for maybe Tim Hardaway, play very similarly. that should give fans a really good idea of who Herder is and the style he plays like. And if we were to get a guy like this, it's great for a couple reasons. If you do have a KCP or a similar guy in the first unit, this would be your second unit guy bringing the same stuff that lets you run the same plays. It helps from a roster building standpoint. It helps you handle injuries easier. If not, that's still fine. It's a guy that you can really quickly run plays for with any group of players on the floor and get some easy points. I would love to see Josh Hart be able to develop into some similar kinds of actions because he was very much a standstill or just a little bit of movement without a screen spot up guy this year. While his final year at Nova, he was the most efficient NCAA off screen shooter. So if he can add the kinds of stuff that Herder's doing, I think that'd be great. So that's how he plays his offensive role. We have, I think, 13 different roles. Point forward would be the one he falls underneath. And then if we're looking at some of the advanced stats, 79th percentile in CPOE, which for the fans, that means he is doing a better job than 79% of the other prospects when it comes to scoring points more than expected on the play types. So in the role he's in, he's scoring more points than 79% of the other prospects are if they were given the same opportunities. His player impact plus minus, which is an on-off court, like a plus minus metric, but it adjusts for luck. So it looks at like free throw shooting and it normalizes that. It looks at opponent 3-point shooting and it normalizes that. He's in the 78th percentile on offense, which is great. 60th percentile on defense, also good. And 73rd overall. So great numbers. He's an interesting guy because he grew up in the town I grew up in, and his coach in high school was my 4th grade teacher, and I was his favorite student. And I reached out recently to reconnect. It was crazy. He remembered I was left-handed. I beat him in chess, all these different things. So I was able to talk to him a little bit, talk to some of my other Shen contacts, and they all raved about his character and his mentality and how like he scores the ball really well, but that's not in like the top 10 things that he cares about. He cares all about winning and making his teammates better and takes so much pride in the passing and the defense and the screening and all of those little things. So I think that was a really cool thing. It's very encouraging to me. Yeah. So those are some of the good. If we want to get into some of the concerns I have, he wasn't a good pick and roll player. He was Maryland's worst pick and roll passer by far, by miles and miles. He was far below the team's pick and roll scoring average from an efficiency standpoint. And then when you look at the ratio for his pick and roll possessions between passing and scoring, the passiveness that he exhibited was something that was on a completely different level than his teammates. So maybe he just loves passing, but it looked, just from those numbers, it looked like he just couldn't get a shot off and he had to defer a lot more than normal. When you look at his ball handling in the pick and roll, he had, of every college basketball player, he had the worst turnover percentage on pick and roll possessions out of any guy with 50 or more. So anyone who was used in the pick and roll frequently, they turned the ball over less than Herder did. So that's a concern that kind of carries over with some of the other parts of his game too. He did better as the season went on, but still wasn't good at that. And then my other two worries with him are when you adjust the level of competition and you look at how he played against Power 5 teams versus everybody, versus like the South Dakota States and the Tulanes. When you just look at the good teams he played, he was a 21st percentile shooting player when he was guarded. So when you guarded a shot, he just wasn't making it. And then he was also only average off of screens when he was playing major conference teams, which was a big strength of his over the season. And he was lights out at it when he was playing worse teams. But when it came to that better competition, he became very mediocre in one of his best skill sets. So those are a couple things I'm concerned about. But you see the good, you see the bad. I see how he would fit in with the Laker team. Love the guy because I have those personal connections. But I don't know. What do you guys think about him?
Well, I know I'm extremely high on him just from the shooting alone. But Clayton is the obvious high one of us on him. I think Clayton has him top 12.
That's too high.
I have him like 15, 14, something like that.
That's too high.
Yeah, Clayton is all over him. I know Nelson is the lowest of the three on us. I think he'd be a perfect fit for Lakers. I don't think he's gonna instantly be amazing like some people think he could be, but I think of the guys that we have, I have listed him. He's one of the best fits for this roster. Just from purely what the Lakers need, and shooting is obviously their biggest need. The Lakers being a bottom 5 shooting team in the league last year, so I definitely see why the Lakers really like him. From what we've probably all heard, I don't think he's going to be there. I think he's going to get drafted in the top 20 still, even with the hand injury. Nelson, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I am probably like the lowest, I guess, because I think I get the potential. I think he's definitely going to be easily top 3 shooter from this class. I'm not really worried about that. I'm not worried about the shooting. I think that, you know, replacing KCP with the cost-effective asset that can play the same role on offense, that's really promising. I thought Tim really just reassured my concerns with the playmaking aspect, the running pick and roll, and all that kind of stuff. I really don't think he can be a secondary ball handler, maybe 3rd or 4th as far as that aspect goes. There's not anything really promising there or anything that can really be untapped. I think he's definitely going to be a rotation player, a role player, a niche player that does have a good amount of like improvement as in his shot can really project and can really be effective in that manner. And the size, I think with the size, he can be at least below average to average on defense, right? I think that size, it really does make a difference between him and, let's say, a JJ Redick. So that's why comparing him to JJ Redick, it really wouldn't be fair, because he can do things that JJ Redick just physically can't do. Like if he has a little bit more bulk, he can play a little bit better with bigger defenders and with switches and all that kind of stuff. He's never going to be great. I saw some solid instincts when I saw the tape on him. So that was promising. But yeah, I mean, I think you guys pretty much hit it all on the nose. I'm going to have him around the 18, 20 range. I see the upside. I see why he's important to the Lakers. Personally, I'm just really invested in Melton, so that's my guy. That's what I'm going to root for. But
thank you for the transition there, Nelson.
But yeah, no, let's get into it, because I think Melton is easily like one of the most intriguing prospects, because he's definitely like a really draft hipster like pick.
Yeah,
because the more you look at it and you're like, oh my god, like if this guy, if he really can tuck that elbow in, if he can really improve that form, then that can happen. And I really do feel like he's like really one of the most intriguing prospects in this draft. Like I wrote a 2-part series for the blog, and it was pretty much just talking about how great he is on defense already, like in all facets, playmaking as far as steals and blocks go, on-ball defense with his quick hands and his good strides, like incredibly good lateral strides, which was really impressive to me. It makes up for his lack of athleticism. He's going to be an elite defender, a defensive player of the year candidate. I'm not really gonna doubt that whatsoever. On offense, basic handle, not anything special, but it does allow him to potentially be a secondary ball handler just because he does have good vision. It's not spectacular. It's not anything out of this world, but it is good, and he can make some pretty some really good reads to shooters, a couple of skip passes and things like that. He does have the whole turnover issue, but I really feel that like that can really be coached out of him, and it really is just more of a young thing.
Yeah.
The shooting is where the concerns obviously lie, because he shot like 20-something% from 3 last year.
I believe it was 29 in his freshman season.
Yeah, that's not about right. Like 30%. And if he really wants to merit a first-round pick, he's probably going to need to raise that.
Yeah.
But he's working with Drew Hanlon and he's working with Markelle Fultz, so I have a lot riding on my boy Drew Hanlon here. So yeah, I really do feel like he's like a really ideal fit for the Lakers, because they had a really good team defense last year, and I feel like having a specialized guy that can be like, all right, stick him on this guy, and from anywhere from 1 to 3, and he'll cause havoc. He has an insane motor. He'll just go. He's great on the transition, a good secondary ball handler for the Lakers. And if maybe he doesn't materialize as a starter, As far as a bench guy, he can really get to the rim, and you won't really have that much competition because usually bench guards are a tad bit lower on the defensive level when it comes to defending. Usually, that's why they're on the bench because they really can't defend. So I feel like Melton can really be effective in today's NBA just because he can really combat against the really good offensive guards. And although if you look down the line and you really try to find like really good offensive guards, like Trae Young's gonna be really good. I'm not really concerned about that.
Mm-hmm.
But there isn't a huge influx of guards, right? That are gonna be great offensively. But if there ever is one, or if even in the playoffs, you can stick him on Steph Curry, and he won't stop Steph, but he'll give him as good of a shot as anyone really can. So I think that's all you can really hope for when it comes to Steph.
Yeah. Tim, I know you tweeted out after the Lakers worked him out that Melton didn't have the best stats in his freshman season. Do you take those stats with sort of like a grain of salt because of he was more of a flashes player to me, but what did you take from Melton's going through film and going through the numbers and stuff?
So as far as the weight that I give it, it's just like you said, it was last year. The fact that it's the last thing that we have to look at as far as numbers does maybe subconsciously make me weigh it a lot more because it's the only thing I have to look at. But in reality, it was last year. He had plenty of time to develop. We're not talking about junior year or sophomore year or freshman year numbers for other players. We're talking about what they did this year and how they developed. Right. And guys in college do develop year to year. So there's a very real chance that nothing that I'm looking at will carry over. But if we are looking at what he did provide to us that freshman season, he wasn't a good jump shooter. He was 7 for 29 pulling up. He was 5 for 21 on open jump shots. His overall jump shooting percentile was 27th percentile. So he was better. He was scoring more points per shot than 27% of college basketball. He was 3 for 15 on floaters. He was average finishing at the rim. So none of that looks good. He was really, really poor in the pick and roll. He was like 10th percentile. So there's a lot of negative signs just as far as the scoring numbers. He did a really poor job attacking closeouts, but just like you guys talked about, the strides he's made this year and what we're seeing in videos and the defense, they're really encouraging, and he does a really great job defensively. I think he does a better job more as a team defender than just the individual, like the synergy primary defender kind of numbers. He was only a 31st percentile defender in that. He was the team's worst spot up defensive player. And he did a really, really poor job. It just based on the numbers alone, it looks like he would roam off of his guy off ball and maybe chase blocks and chase steals. But that's I haven't looked at the film on that. So that's just what I'm seeing in the numbers, which may or may not be true. But that's the way his numbers are aligned compared to the way I've seen other players' numbers and the way I've confirmed that with the film. It's that kind of trend, would be my guess. But the scouts I've talked to, they really love his defense. The only wish is maybe he were a little bit bigger. Yeah. But other than that, he's a lights out defender. So I see where the Lakers could be looking with a guy like this. You just have to really work him out and see if the shooting is there or not, and if he can be a playmaker and handle the ball well.
Right. I definitely agree with that. He's the guy that I'm expecting the most to be the Lakers pick. He seemed like the most likely in that range. So he's the one that sort of seems like the norm for a lot of like that seems like the most common name that comes up with people when you ask people who you think 2025 will be. But you know, if the top two guys are gone, I think a lot of Laker fans see these two as the top two guys. It gets really interesting afterwards. Let's talk about a guy who is sort of a lot of NBA draft Twitter hipster people really love him, and I think a lot of people are lower on him than they should be. It's Cincinnati's Jacob Evans. Tim, I know you when you had Mike Garcia on your guys' pod, and he brought up Evans, and I think you said his numbers weren't really they were good, but nothing like I know Shamit had like insane numbers if I remember the pod right. But from what you've seen from Evans, what do you like? What you dislike? How do you think he fits with the Lakers?
Yeah, so my answer here will be about the same it was there. He's pretty much above average across the board. There isn't one thing where I'm like, oh man, that's his elite area or his elite play type or skill. But he's just very solid offensively. He's not a great pull-up shooter. His floater is bad, but he finishes really well at the rim. His pick and roll passing and scoring is good, and everything else is just above average. And defensively, the numbers check out really well. 89th percentile defensive player impact plus minus. So that's a glue guy for you, and that's the role that the stats have him playing. So I understand it. I think it'd be a good guy that we can throw in and immediately be somebody that you can afford to have on the court with LeBron and Paul George and whoever else is out there. And he's not going to let you down. He's not going to do a ton or create a whole lot, but I don't know. He's a solid guy that there's a lot to build off of, and the foundation is there right now. Yeah. Whereas a lot of these other guys have big holes that you need to see if they can fill and if the team can work around it for the first year or two.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of how people sort of perceived Josh Hart coming into last season. Just because Josh Hart was a guy who a lot of people thought he was really good at. He was above average at a lot of things. He never really had an elite skill. But, obviously Lakers drafted him at 30, and he was one of the better rookies of the class, and he's very promising as a role player and as a shooter and so on and so forth. I think people are kind of overthinking Evans, and I think if you can guarantee me a guy who can give me 15 to 20 good minutes every night off your bench, and you get that with 25, I'm definitely taking that. Looking at like the odds of how good a player that late can actually be. If you can give me a guy that's just solid, then I'm happy. And I think he's just that really solid guy. Nelson, do you have any thoughts on Evans, or are you sort of think the same way I do?
No, yeah, I'm with you. I feel like if you can really bring in a guy that's like that solid in those kind of aspects, and as far as like what I'm looking for now, I'm not really looking for anything like really high upsidey unless like someone falls and the situation presents itself, like take your trade up. But yeah, I'm just looking for contributors like right now. Although you should really be drafting for years to come. I do feel like there are some players that are able to contribute right now and have some sort of upside. And I personally think that Lakers are really good at finding guys who like they really balance out like what they bring right now and what they can contribute later on. Like you see all the prospects right now, and I'm not talking about the top picks, but you see them progress and you see them be pegged as like usually like with Josh Hart, you see him pegged as all the solid guy, there's all his skills all around. But now you hear him talking about how he's going to improve in these areas and try to expand on these areas. And I feel like once you come to the NBA, you're given so many avenues. As far as an athlete, you're given all these new athletic programs and these new ways to develop as an athlete and increase your burst and increase your jump and increase your first step and things like that. So I really do feel that like Jacob Evans is a guy that could possibly be that guy that people peg right now as just solid in these areas. But like once they step into the NBA, they become more than probably what was expected.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing really quickly?
Go ahead.
Schematically, from a defensive standpoint, Cincinnati and under Mick Cronin, what they've done for years and what they've been really successful at is off-ball defenders. Like normally as an off-ball defender, you have your stance is more open and you're seeing your ball and you're seeing the man and your back is to the basket. At Cincinnati, if I'm on the weak side and the ball is at the opposite wing, I'm just straight up facing the ball and not looking at my guy. And the way that works for them is they have rim protectors, and what they're trying to do is jump passes that way and stop drives, and it works really well for them. But it can get you back cut, like you can back cut the hell out of that defense all day long if that rim protection isn't there. So my one concern with him defensively would be he just needs to change pretty much all of his off-ball technique, because that's not the way the Lakers play. That's not how any NBA defenses play. He'd need to have a stance where he's instead of being closed, he'd have to be open. And if he is playing with that same kind of stance, he's going to get back cut all day. And right now we don't have the rim protection to back that up. And that's just creating problems for your defense if everybody's not on the same page. It's a defense you can play, but if he's the only guy playing it, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That evaluation of that. Let's talk about two players who seem to be a little jumbled together sometimes. In Melvin Frazier and Josh Okogie. Nelson, let's start with you. Of the two guys, who do you like more, and what do you see from both of them?
I'm starting to come around on Melvin Frazier. I know his measurables are really promising, and that's kind of like the first thing that I really look at. But you know, his fundamentals on defense are shaky. Like I'm not from what I've seen on the film, they're not anything overly spectacular. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure Cranjis can add more to that. But I do feel that like his length is enough to where you could possibly invest in it, and he can switch. So that's really promising. And the Lakers run a pretty switch heavy scheme, mm-hmm. which allows for like them to value that more than other players would. And the issue comes with the shot, right? So pretty much what everyone talks about is if he can shoot, he's a top prospect. He's a lottery prospect. But if he can't, then that really undercuts his potential, right? That's kind of like the main theme of who he is as a player. Mm-hmm. But I think he has a pretty good motor when it comes to the defensive end, and I'm not really worried about the defense, and I understand what the concerns with the release and the mechanics of the 3-point shot and why you wouldn't necessarily bank on it. But if a team like sees him, I feel like this is really a workout driven guy. Mm-hmm. That since he shows these flashes on tape, and you're like, okay, intriguing. Like he does a lot of bad stuff, but he does some good stuff. And let's see like what he can do in the workout. If he does so and so in the workout, then it's another situation where the workout and the entire process can help. But he's just really limited on the offensive end, and I think he's just too limited a bit for my taste. So I'm more interested in him than Josh Okogie, just because I feel like Josh Okogie is definitely like a smarter player in general, but he doesn't really have any advanced characteristics at all to make me be like, oh, okay, like this guy can, because he's one of those slightly a little bit of that guy that can do a lot of stuff, but he's not really specialized in an area. And I feel like Melvin Frazier, you at least know that on defense, if you really teach him the fundamentals, then he can really become a good defender on that aspect. I feel like that's a skill that he has down. And at this point, you just want someone who can give you a skill, right? Mm-hmm. And with Josh Okogie, there are some promising signs of him as a scorer, but his jump shot's still a little bit iffy too. So I'm not so confident on that.
Yeah, I think something to think about with these guys too are their roles on their respective teams. Okogie was the guy at Georgia Tech. He had a terrible team around him, and he had the ball in his hands a lot. He was the guy that they just relied on to just do everything. I think it was sort of the same with Melvin Frazier, because I mean, can you really name another guy on Tulane? Those are two bad teams that had some high level prospects on their team, and they had to do a lot for their team, and maybe that's not what they would do in the NBA. So I wouldn't be surprised if really both of them popped more than they did in college in the NBA. Tim, of those two, is there a preference you have in those two guys?
My preference would be neither. Neither. I don't like either of the two. Just looking, I haven't watched film on either of these two guys. Right. Just looking at the film, Frazier is a 6th percentile player impact plus minus guy on offense. He was their worst pick and roll scorer. Mm-hmm. He was their worst pick and roll passer and one of the worst in college. You don't often see guards, or you don't often see guys who have the pick and roll and posting up both in their top 3 used play types. Uh-huh. He's like a 6'5" guy who posted up a ton, and that seems to be where he's most comfortable. So that's not something I expect to translate over and have a real impact. So I don't know. It's a lot of weird and unimpressive data. And when I'm looking at just from a data standpoint, you want players, whenever you're looking at projecting them to a higher level, whether it's G League to NBA or low-level college to high-level college or high-level college to NBA, you want those guys to be excelling at stuff. If he's supposed to be good at something, the data better back that up. And then when we bring him to a high level of competition, maybe it dips down in efficiency. And that's the normal way of things. But if somebody's already worse than 94% of players on offense, bringing him over to a higher level of competition usually won't improve that. And Okogie is another guy who's similar, 24th percentile player impact plus minus on offense, another awful pick and roll passer, worst on his team, among the worst in college. He didn't make a floater all season. He was the bottom quarter of college players at finishing at the rim. That doesn't include floaters. Bad short range, bad mid range data, below average pulling up. He's very much more of a catch and shoot guy. And if you could stop that, he's not doing anything because he's not scoring inside. He's not scoring pulling up. So I'm not a big fan of either of the two. And when you look at their possession shares, when we talk about, they're doing everything, the possession shares for these two guys are 58th percentile for Frazier and 53rd percentile for Okogie. So we have plenty of other prospects who are carrying a heavier burden and a heavier scoring workload than these two.
Yeah.
And had better data. So just from that standpoint, it's a pass from me.
Got it. I've fallen on Okogie a lot recently, but I don't see them drafting either. The Lakers didn't work out Frazier, so I don't really see him as an option. They worked out Okogie. I heard they worked out Okogie twice. I don't know if that was true or not, but that was something else floating around there. I just don't see them going with him, and I see them going with a lot of different options. We can't really talk about Simons and Robinson and really Okobo because we don't really have a ton of data on Simmons and Robinson, and Okobo is in a different Euro league. So let's go to Shake Milton, who might end up being a 39 pick option for Lakers. I know the one aspect of his game that was great at SMU was shooting. Tim, does the data translate that?
Oh yeah, he shot 42% from deep all 3 years at SMU. So expect that to translate over.
Yeah, 100. Yeah. Do you see him as an option at 25, or is he more a guy that you are trying to get at 39 or possibly 47?
If I can get him at 39 or 47, I'd be pretty happy. His data checks out really well, offensively, defensively. We're talking about an elite offensive guy by the advanced data. He's multi-dimensional in his attacking in the pick and roll as a spot up scorer. Scoring at the rim wasn't quite where you'd want it to be for someone at SMU. But he's great off of screens to his left, to his right. He can't hit anything, but to his left, he's really good. He's solid catch and shoot guy. Like we said, really great 3-point shooter. And defensively, he was the team's best pick and roll guy. And his data across the board is pretty good too. So he's not, I don't know. There are better players out there, but he's a guy that if we drafted him, I'd be pretty happy. And he's one of the non-Power 5 guys that put up great numbers, and that like him versus the other two that we just talked about is miles and miles of difference to me from a statistical standpoint.
Yeah, and actually the next guy that we can bring up too, who is probably in that same boat as non-Power 5 guys with great stats, is Landry Shamet, and he might be in the same boat in the draft as well, because I've seen him falling a lot in the second. And I know the numbers for Shamet are ridiculous in advanced stats, right, Tim?
Oh yeah, yep. I think I shared his synergy profile with Pete and with Ben Rosales, and both of them just kind of went off on him. He's great. His shooting is ridiculous. He's just a lights out shooter. There were no college basketball players that shot better than him on contested jump shots this year, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
He's great off the dribble. He's great catching and shooting. In the pick and roll, he's solid both as a passer and a scorer. He can shoot at the rim. His floater's great. Pulling up's great. It's like he can make plays. This is a guy who had it's someone who defensively is good enough and offensively is just crazy, and can play on ball and off ball in a way that, of all of the guys that I looked at, I think there were 21 or 22 of them for this podcast, he's the guy that I'd have 1 or 2. The top 3 for me for sure. So I'd be really happy with him for any of those 3 picks that the Lakers would take.
Right, and I'm assuming you'd rather have him than Milton as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nelson, do you have a preference between the two? I think we've talked about both a lot on the pod. But,
yeah. I'm definitely going Shamet. And I get what Tim was talking about as far as like his numbers were like really insane, and I understand all the good indicators. On defense, I have a good amount of issues, but this isn't the top of the draft where like you're really worried about this guy like starting. Like Landry Shamet coming off the bench and in like certain third quarter spurts. Nick Alonso, I think that's really promising, and it really alleviate the concerns him and Huerter or some kind of shooter or some kind of floor spacer, preferably Shamet or Huerter. These guys can like immediately like just not make you stress out too much about Alonso's shot, because if you draft probably like a Melton or a more defensive oriented guy, like maybe you trade up for Zaire or you get a Melvin Frazier or something like that, you're really banking on Alonso to be able to spread the floor, right? And with a Shamet who can create for himself, who can spread the floor on and off the ball, who's going to be a defensive liability, but that's what Lonzo's there for. And I feel like Shamet, he has some things that weigh him down that he can't, change about himself, his height and his sleight of frame. But his offensive upside it's there, and I'm warming up to him in the first round, especially in the latter portion where it kind of just becomes the early second round pretty much. Yeah. I really wouldn't mind taking him there, especially with his. I'm sure his advanced numbers are going to be insane, and they'll probably continue to be insane in the NBA.
Yeah, I think with Shamet, I definitely like Shamet over Milton. I think a thing that dropped a lot of people on Shamet was the promise of the 7-foot wingspan that everyone said he had.
Yeah,
and ended up being 6'7" or something like that. It ended up being nothing close to a 7-foot wingspan, which a lot of people were mad about. And I think he didn't put him and Shake both didn't have great combines, which I think dropped both for me. But I've risen a lot on Shamet, especially if we can get Shamet at 39. After getting a Melton or someone like that at 25,
that's huge.
That's a great. That's
big time.
Draft. That's a huge draft right there. And as we sort of move a little more into the second round, I gave the 4 or 5 guys that I would like at 47 to Tim. So let's start with Javon Carter, who I think is a name that might sort of drop at 47. What were Javon Carter's numbers at West Virginia like?
Yeah, so I really liked him. He's not good at the rim or with his floater. Those were 13th and 16th percentile compared to college basketball, but he's a really solid defensive player. He's really great in the pick and roll, pretty much everywhere else offensively. He's done a nice job. He's a great catch and shoot guy, solid pull-up scorer. He can shoot from short, medium, and long range. He didn't do such a great job running off of screens this year, but he has enough versatility and he's a good enough defender that he's a guy I can see the Lakers taking and them being able to put him out on the court, and he can hit open shots and he can play defense and play team defense. So I liked him. He's on the higher end of the guys that I've looked at.
If we do get Carter, I would love to watch like every practice, see him get into Lonzo every single practice, because that dude is a bulldog and he has some of the quickest hands I've ever seen from a defender. I mean, that guy averaged I think 3 or 4 steals per game last year, which is absolutely insane. And yes, it's pressed Virginia, and how they just suffocate everybody. It wasn't like a lot of like really like dumb turnovers that he just got. He was snatching the basketball away from a lot of dudes, which was it's a ton of fun to watch on TV and stuff. Nelson, do you like Javon Carter in that range?
Yeah, definitely a second round guy for me. Would not take him in the first. But as a second round, we're talking about just more guard depth in general. Like I think I brought this point up a good amount of times, but not necessarily drafting backup point, but just getting more guards there to play. That'd be promising, because we have Caruso, we have Lonzo, and then we have Hart who can play some too. But after that, we don't really have like too much there. KCP's probably not going to come back, right? So then we're in the guards, and I feel like Javon Carter, he's solid enough and capable enough to really be effective on that end, and in second round, I'd be more than comfortable with him.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that a lot of people have brought up in that second round, that 47 pick. I can see him at 39 as well. Now let's move on to a little bit of the big men that I've brought up. let's start with Wenyen Gabriel. He's a guy that I've risen a lot on as the second round pick. What do the analytics say about Gabriel, Tim?
So he's a big man that is really bad at big man things. Really bad putting on putbacks, dump offs, cuts, post ups, picking and rolling or picking and popping. But what he does do really, really well is hit, catch, and shoot threes. Right. He can space the floor really well with that. He doesn't have any mid-range game. He was 0 for 2 on pull-ups this year. He's not a playmaker. So he's very siloed offensively, but he does that role well. And he's a guy where if you're taking him for that 98th percentile defensive player impact plus minus. He's switchable. He defends the rim and blocks shots really well for a 6'9" guy, which allows him to be a solid small ball 5. He just needs to put on a little bit of weight for that to work well, but has a great motor. He'll get deflections. He'll take charges. His on-ball defense is average to slightly below average, but his team defense is really strong, and his help defense is amazing. So I get it with him. He can't do a whole lot offensively, but what he does well, and defensively, you can do a lot with him.
Yeah, I think it was Sam Vecini that tweeted out that Kentucky was like +9 better in point differential when he was on the court compared to when he was off. Like he was that impactful to their defense in Kentucky, and he's just a guy that he's the type of big man you want off your bench, and if in a pinch, if you need him to play down the stretch and switch on guys, like that's the NBA today. The guys who can switch on the guards and handle their own and hit threes from a spot up are like they're perfect role players. Nelson, what do you have about Wenyen?
Yeah, so he's been at Kentucky for a few years now, and usually we've been drafting in the high end. So I've been keeping my eye out on Kentucky, and yeah, as far as a big man, he's really he will not meet anyone's expectations because he really got tossed around in the paint. And just because of his slight build, like he's not really like all that strong at all. Doesn't have any core. Doesn't have any real strength, right? So that allows him to get tossed around a lot. But on switches, he was really promising, and he's come a long way, like from last year to this year, as far as like knowing how to do some basketball stuff. Yeah, last year he was a really high recruit, but he just did not really know how to play this whole basketball thing, and now he's just kind of starting to discover it, and you kind of saw it more and more. And I think with any guy, you really want to see development, just steady development. Like, all right, what did he do the first year? First year was trash. All right, that's not good. Second year, what did he do? He did this and this and this. He improved in this area. Like, he's still not strong. He still gets tossed around, but he's finally starting to figure out like how to play basketball more, which is really enticing with the guy with his measurables and with his potential. So as far as a second round flyer, like I see it with him. He's definitely gonna need some work around the edges, but if you wanna stash him in the D League and then see how he progresses through that, then there's some promise with him as far as like the switching and some shooting aspects. But yeah, I mean it'd be a fine second round flyer. He's not anyone that you're like really chomping at the bit to get. At least in my opinion. So
the guy who I think is the absolute like he's the lottery ticket dice roll of this range, and it's Wenyen's teammate Jared Vanderbilt. Me and Nelson are very high. Not very high. We like Vanderbilt a lot in that range. He only played 14 games for Kentucky this year, which is not the best sample size. And I know he was really limited on the court. He really was just a guy who rebounded and put backs and tried to play defense. I think from watching some of his high school tape, he was a little more than just a big who got garbage stuff. So from the 14 games that he played, is there any sort of stats that are usable to like sort of project his NBA roles?
It's really difficult just because there's so little data. When we talk about his possession share, he had, I think, the lowest or second lowest usage of all of the prospects I have in my database. Who are like declared guys who realistically could get taken. Of his possessions he did have, 40% of them were putbacks, 21% were dump offs and cuts. And even on those really high, and I don't want to say easy, but high percentage looks, he was converting really poorly. He had a 6th percentile CPOE. So only 6% of players would have done worse on the shots that he took than he did. 19th percentile offensive player impact plus minus. His defense was above average, but everything he did from a synergy point of view, his primary defense and his offensive possessions, he did poorly, really poorly. But the thing is, again, small samples, didn't play a lot. This is another guy where you throw this stuff out if he goes in and does a really good job on 2 or 3 different workouts. And I don't know how many times the Lakers worked him out, but just based on the lack of a work sample from him, from an HR standpoint, I would want to run him through a bunch of tests and make sure he's legit, because you don't have a lot to go off of for this season.
Yeah, he's a guy that I've seen a lot of Kentucky fans sort of compare his skill set to Julius Randle's. Because I think, again, he showed a lot more before he was at Kentucky with some more wing skill. He's not a wing; he's a 4-5. He's gonna be a 4-5 in the NBA. But there was stuff that he showed that was a little more skilled than what he looked like in Kentucky. Nelson, what do you see in him? Why do you like him as much as I do? That spot.
I value rebounding.
Yeah.
As far as if you're gonna be a small ball big first of all, and he does that. He does do that. And I think he definitely is going to be a small ball 5 that he can't really play the 4, in my opinion. I don't think he's going to be able to keep up with them. But as a small ball 5, like he's relatively athletic. Like, I think it's fair to say that, right, Rich?
Yeah.
And I feel that, like, with that, he becomes a dive threat, a lob guy, someone who potentially can switch. He's not like the most refined defender in the world, but he does show that upside. And I think Cranjis said it best, like that the sample size isn't huge and there's not really much to go on, especially from a number standpoint. And Lakers do value, those kind of analytics. So that may make some people a little bit more, timid, or at least lukewarm on him. But personally, I just feel that, like, in the second round, like, I wouldn't mind having him. Although we do already have a couple of 5s. I wouldn't mind trading Zubats and trying to see. Although him and Thomas Bryant are like kind of the same ilk, so that's kind of a little bit redundant. But I do feel that Vanderbilt does provide some more switching upside, so that's more promising. And I think that's probably kind of the upshot on him.
Yeah. I definitely agree on that. He's a guy that you can't really project too high. I think you're still kind of going off his high school mid stage a little bit too, just because of his role and what he barely played. He really didn't play. I think he played something like 10 to 15 minutes per game that he played at Kentucky. So I'm looking at him more from a tools sort of standpoint, and I just like the potential of the rebounding. I think he's a better athlete than someone like a Julius Randle. I think he can be switchable. But obviously he's a huge dice roll. I mean, at 47, he's not really a huge dice roll. He's just a guy that you're trying to shoot for the moon for and hope he reaches the high upside that he could bring.
And the shooting isn't really promising, so that's kind of the issue there.
Right. Last 2 we have here are 2 big men, or a big man and a guard. Let's start with Kansas's Malik Newman. He's a guy that I liked a lot. Like, he's the guy that was a top. I think he was the number 1 point guard in his class. He went to Missouri State. He wasn't that good over there. He sat out a year. He played at Kansas at his junior year, and he killed it in the March Madness. Tim, what are the stats for him? I know defense is not going to be pretty, but offensively, what are his stats looking like?
Yeah, you're right. The defense is bad. Offensively, he was a spot-up wing in terms of his play style with Danny Green, Kelly Oubre, DeMar Carroll as some of his top comps. He was an elite pick-and-roll passer and scorer. For the overall numbers look pretty good. 83rd percentile CPOE and 77th percentile offensive player impact plus minus. He was a solid spot-up shooter, did a good job catching and shooting as well as attacking closeouts. He was great off the dribble. There were a couple areas I'm concerned with. Scoring at the rim, he was below average. We've seen worse, but he was just a little bit below average. And then when he was guarded, he was a 27th percentile jump shooter. So he's lights out when he's open, but when he's guarded, he doesn't shoot so hot. And then, like you talked about, the defense is really, really, really bad.
Yeah, for a 6'3" guy who isn't a good athlete, I expected that for him. I sort of see him in a Jamal Crawford type of spark plug offense off the bench role. I think he can be a UDFA guy as well, along with a guy like Wenyen Gabriel. But and maybe even Jared Vanderbilt. Like, we don't even know where he can go, but I definitely like the idea of just having a guy who can shoot off the bench like that. Nelson, what do you think of Malik as a 47th or a undrafted free agent type option?
Honestly, I'm just gonna go with a lot of what Ken just said on this one.
Yeah,
I agreed 100% with all that he said.
Got it. Yeah, I've seen some people sort of compare him to Jordan Clarkson, which, I mean, it looks bad right now, but he wasn't terrible as a Laker. He still had some really good numbers. He just would never pass the ball on pick and rolls when he had easy reads. But, you know, shout out to Jordan for getting us the 25th pick and maybe LeBron James. Moving on to the last player. I know at Canyon Driver, Mike Garcia did a player profile on him on Lakers Outsiders. Elise Johnson he went to Mississippi State, right? I think he did. A big man from Mississippi State. What were the numbers looking like for him, Tim?
Not the way I would want them to look.
Right.
He's categorized as a versatile big, 20th percentile CPOE, 49th percentile offensive player impact plus minus, which I don't know. He posted up a lot. His post up data wasn't great considering the level of competition. He was an average passer, not a good shooter at all. And if I'm getting a 6'9" power forward, I need him to either be either a good shooter, an elite defender, some amazing post player or playmaker, and he's none of those things.
Right.
And so I don't know. He's not a guy I'm seeing as someone who has high upside just from a data standpoint.
Right. He's a guy that I wouldn't mind him there. He's a guy that was a guard in high school. And he just grew up. He got huge, and I think he was a guard for like his junior year. He was like a 5'10", 5'11" guard, and then he just had a giant growth spurt and became a big, pretty much. I like the skills as a big who can just take it coast to coast. I know Mike sort of compares him to like a poor man's Julius. Obviously he's not as strong and athletic as Julius, but I think the ball handling is good for a guy his size and his position. He's a guy that. What were his transition numbers like, Tim?
Give me just a second.
Hang on. Yeah, no problem. I know he's a guy that I know Mike talked a lot about him being a guy who you can use a lot in transition. Or not a lot, but a guy who can grab and go, like Julius. I think Julius is a lot more skilled in terms of his playmaking, and a lot stronger, a lot bigger, a better finisher. But at 47, and him being a mobile big who he can sort of switch. He isn't Julius again. Like he's a poor man Julius. He would be a Julius sort of replacement, but like not as good, obviously. As Tim looks it up, do you have any thoughts on Elise, Nelson?
I saw Mike's article on Lakers Outsiders, and I was intrigued. I like high energy bigs. I think that's kind of my little niche. And I feel that with that kind of motor and those kind of skills, he's definitely not Julius, but Julius light. The more I think about it, the more I do see the appeal, and I do understand why that's so intriguing. Because the skills that Julius does, they may not appear to be insanely valuable, but they kind of are, as far as the rebounding, the high motor, the willingness to run the floor as a rim runner. These are all basic skill sets that maybe doesn't do them at an elite level, but I mean, talking about Elise, he might do them at an elite level, but if he does them as a good enough level, he'll warrant whatever selection he ends up with in the second round. So I think at that point, these are the kind of guys that you kind of go for, as far as a lot of tickets go, in my opinion.
Right.
All right. So you were asking about transition.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
24th percentile transition scoring.
Got it. Well, I guess it's more flash than anything with him.
Yeah. And another concern, and this is actually straight from Mike Garcia, is he's much more of a position defender and not a guy who projects to be switchable, which is something the Lakers like to do and is what the NBA in general is kind of moving towards.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's definitely why someone like Julius is so important to the Lakers last year. I mean, I can't remember what the number was specifically, but I remember his synergy number for isolation defense was like something like 65 plus with him. And for the guy who faced the most switches in the NBA, that's pretty damn good. And having someone like him on the team, it just helps out the team in general be able to defend it in a lot more unique and a lot more diverse way. But if Elise can do the sort of energy stuff that I know Mike likes a lot with him and the grab and go potential with him, I definitely get the dice roll at 47. But again, there isn't. He's not going to be. He's not going to provide anything close to what Julius is right now. I just think him and Julius are a lot different, just in build and everything like that. But that was last on my list. Tim, did you have anyone that we didn't bring up either in the first or the second that stuck out to you while you're looking at prospects that you like?
So I have notes on a couple different guys.
Yeah.
Dante DiVincenzo is someone who stood out. I know during scrimmages. I've got stuff on Keita Bates-Diop, Kyrie Thomas, Gary Trent Jr., Aaron Holiday. I don't know, Grayson Allen. Any of those guys, Alonzo Trier. Any of those guys that either of you have opinions on or want to hear about?
Dante is the guy that I want to hear on. He's the guy that I'm the highest on out of all the guys you listed.
Yeah, so he was a guy who I was expecting to be really high on. And then when I looked into the numbers a little bit closer, I don't know, I'm lower on him than I thought I'd be. He was the only Villanova player not to be in the 90th percentile or above in his scoring. He was the team's worst spot-up shooter, transition scorer, and isolation player. But he's good catching and shooting. He's elite off the dribble, which is something that we saw a lot of in big moments in big games.
Yeah.
He finishes all right at the rim, doesn't have any sort of floater. I think he hit like 3 on the season. He can have tunnel vision at times in the pick and roll, but he's a good passer in general. Decent on-ball defender, not a great team defender. 25th percentile player impact plus minus on defense, 98th percentile for offense. So the team was much better with him on the court. He just happened to be the least amazing of their incredibly efficient offensive players in just about every area that he did, which I thought was interesting. But I don't know. He's a guy who I'm a little hesitant on just because we've seen a lot from him just in big moments or in like one scrimmage. And I want to weigh everything properly. And hey, if he kills workouts, that's good. And I can't contradict myself and say with other guys that the workouts matter a lot. And then for him say, well, but he was only an 87th percentile player or something like that. Right. So I definitely see the upside. But the very quick, the vibe I'm getting from people doesn't match up with the data from the season. Right. But again, if he does well in the workouts, great. And I'd be happy with him.
Nelson, was there anyone on that list that he said they wanted to hear more about?
I actually want to add a little bit about Dante DiVincenzo because I am not a fan. I have him ranked in the low 40s.
There's a reason why I try to skirt past it. So
I'm sorry. This is coming and here it is. I just think that he is going to be edge of the NBA roster kind of guy. He'll have his moments where he scores a lot of points in a few games for a bad team probably, and then everyone's like, oh my god, Dante DiVincenzo, and then he'll probably go quiet, and then he'll probably just come in every once in a while, probably towards the end of games. I'm not really high on him. I don't really see the appeal. Like as far as shooting goes, like I understand like where the appeal comes from there, but I just don't really think that he's insanely good in that aspect. I think he's fine. He does have some athleticism in that restraint, but his handle is not really anything much. His first step isn't really much. So if he can't really create, and his defense from what I saw wasn't anything ideal either. I just saw a guy who scored a lot of points in the championship game, and everyone started raving about him. And he's a white guy that jumps a little bit, so crazy. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't anything that really stood out to me that much. And the first round hype is just hilarious to me, honestly. So whenever anyone drafts him, probably the Celtics, I really hope the Celtics take him because, that they're kind of guy. I just be yelling reach from my seat.
Oh man, yeah. I definitely have him like top 25, so that's why it's a big different from me and Nelson how we feel about him. But Nelson, is there anyone else that he listed?
I want to hear a little bit more about Alonzo Trier because he was kind of talked about. I think he had a second workout, so that could be a guy I think might target. So I kind of want to hear more about him, Tim.
Yeah, sure. So he's a really good offensive player, 95th percentile CPOE, 94th percentile PIPM on offense. He's a really good pick and roll scorer, average passer. He attacks closeouts really well and did a really good job spotting up and like getting to the rim. He's an average catch and shoot guy, just like Dante DiVincenzo, but he's an elite pull up guy again, just like Dante. Also has no floater, just like Dante, but finishes at an elite level at the rim. Has good on-ball defense, horrible off-ball defense, and kind of will wander away and kind of lose focus at times, which leads to his 24th percentile defensive PIPM. So there are actually a lot of similarities between those two guys, but is another person who played on a big team for a couple of years and played a big role, and seems to be a solid offensive contributor that can come in and score some points and be a playmaker.
Yeah, no, I heard like too many, just like Dante DiVincenzo. So I think I'm officially off on him, and I hope the Lakers don't drop him. So, but
too similar.
Too similar, yeah, way too similar.
You're gonna be so mad when he's the next Kuzma.
You know what? I'll eat my words. Like if he truly is next Kuzma, I'll be fine admitting that. But all the indicators, all the film that I've seen, do not point to that. And I'm a firmly stand and die on the hill that Dante DiVincenzo does not merit a first-round pick. So.
Okay, well, we'll die on that hill. Last one I want to hear about with Gary Trent. He's the guy that I've had a feeling that the Lakers, he can be the out-of-nowhere guy the Lakers draft. I remember Woj on ESPN radio. He a couple weeks ago, he drafted him at 25 for Lakers. Maybe I thought there was something he was hearing. So what's the numbers for Gary Trent Jr.?
So he made 6 pick and roll shots and out of 37, which is probably the worst I have ever seen from any prospect that I've looked at. 14th percentile finishing at the rim. He's a good catch and shoot guy, average pull up. Floater's not good, but he was good catching and shooting off of screens and spotting up. He didn't really attack closeouts much. It was more just catch and shoot. And he did a good job with that. And so I don't know, not a dynamic guy.
Yeah.
The fact that he's so poor in the pick and roll and then scoring at the rim and with a floater kind of limits what you can get out of him, at least immediately. So he's not a guy I'm high on.
Yeah. He's a guy that I think people are just seeing Duke freshman who's still super young and he's 6'5" and he's a bigger guy who can shoot, that there's some upside there. I sort of jumped on the bus for a week or two, and then I watched more of him and I wasn't as sold as I thought I was. So he's probably a top 40 guy for me. I wouldn't mind if he was at 47 for the Lakers because he's still a high upside type of guy. But
and he can't shoot, so that's always a positive.
Yeah, I can definitely see that for sure. But I mean, he's not high on my list for 25 or 39 or 47. I think that would be it. Nelson, anyone else, or are you good?
Actually, I think I'm good on this one.
All right. I think that should be it. Tim, thanks for joining us, man. It was a lot of fun hearing all the stats on these guys. Now Nelson can definitely have more ammo against Hoarder, against Clayton. He can throw those pick and roll passing numbers at him, and Clayton will have nothing to say. And yes, I'm talking a lot about Clayton on this podcast because he's not on the podcast. So he can.
Yeah, he's ducking me, man. He's been ducking me.
You're his De'Aaron Fox, man. He's Lonzo, you're De'Aaron Fox. He's ducking you, man.
Yeah, man.
We need to finally get him on a pod with you so we can have him stop ducking you.
Yeah, absolutely. But thanks, guys, for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Anything you wanted to push? Anything you have coming out soon that you wanted to push?
I have stuff coming out, but I don't know exactly when it'll happen, and we're keeping things close to the vest. But I have a team of people put together with some exciting things, data tools, maybe a website, and I'll be looking to hire on like 30 to 35 writers in the next month or two.
Sounds promising.
So lots of things that I wish I could talk about. Can't talk about right now. But I don't know. I'll be keep an eye out for me tomorrow. I'll be throwing stats out there for whoever the Lakers end up getting. And I hope the Lakers sign Fletcher McGee to an undrafted contract, because that guy from Wofford, if you don't know about him,
no,
now you do.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
194, number 3 out of Wofford, Fletcher McGee. He ran off of 154 screens this year, and I think he had the highest CPOE of any player this year. He hit like 100 3-pointers off the dribble. Like, the dude's ridiculous. I just want to see him run in circles off of screens all day long.
The new Matt Thomas, some might say.
Even he's like JJ Redick on like drugs. If his drugs were just running and running. So I don't know. I just want to see this guy play more basketball.
Oh, that would be incredible just to see that, him running in circles, just making like 9 threes in one summer league game. That'd be incredible.
Yeah. He's so good at the just stupid looking shots. Like, what the like I cannot believe you just took that and then it goes in like 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah, that I need to watch. I need to watch more of this guy now.
This guy definitely sounds like
a lot of fun.
Watch him, and they beat UNC this year. Watch game film of that, because they upset the Tar Heels, and he was a big part of that.
He sounds like that guy from who's that guy from Marshall, the white point guard who just made everything from like 30 feet against Wichita, and I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah. I forget his name. And he's also like, there was a guy for Creighton a couple years ago who literally, like, at practice, they would just have him running around and shooting threes, and that's all he would do. And he took like 500 3-pointers and like 15 2-pointers in his career.
That's awesome. Oh man. But yeah. Anyway, thank you, Tim, again. You can follow Tim at T1M_NBA, or you can just look up Cranjis McBasketball. You'll probably be able to find him there as well. Nelson, go ahead and push the stuff that just came out for the site recently.
Yeah, so I wrote a 2-part series on DeAnthony Melton, and I feel that like I contrast Tim well, because I'm very much a film oriented and film heavy guy, and Tim really brings out the stats and the numbers that usually are a really good way to decide whether you want to go into a prospect. I usually go just by, I go to the big boards, the consensus ones, the guys that I trust, like Cole, Sam, guys like that. And then I look through the list and I look at where the Lakers are drafting, and usually I'll go and look at the film via that. But Tim really does do a good job of offering stats, so it was a pleasure to have you on, Tim. And
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and I wrote a really important article about hair that I pushed at the beginning of the podcast, and I will push again because I'm really proud of that. I've never written an article with a bigger smile, and it's extremely ridiculous, not serious whatsoever. I'm gonna have a top 14 big board just to join in on the big board fun. That'll be much more serious and much more like actual opinions on actual basketball. But if you want to take a break from all these big boards and all these mocks, you can go have a laugh and read my all hair team.
I want to thank Nelson for introducing me to Keanu Pinder. I completely forgot who the Keanu Pinder ever existed, and then Nelson throws him in the all hair team, and
that's what it's for.
In my life, man.
That's what it's for.
Ooh, I just googled him. I can confirm. Hair game is strong.
Hair game is strong. It was a lot of fun reading that. Nelson did a great job on it. Go look at the Melton stuff. We had a Kobo piece from our writer Jacob Noble, and we had a couple Kawhi stuff that came out today and yesterday. So keep check with the podcast, and the blog will be getting a lot more active there as well, especially with Nelson back. Be sure to follow the podcast at Under the Bus Pod. Be sure to follow me at Merge Christian. Follow Nelson at I don't know _
Espinoza.
There it is. Thank you. And again, follow Tim at T1M_NBA. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys later. Peace.